Welcome to Medrash Maisa, where we share a story related to the week's Parsha, the week's Torah reading. In last week, in this week's Parsha, we read about the laws of Dayanim, of the judges in Beis Din. We learned about the requirements for who can be a Dayan. We learned about their obligations, especially their obligation to be objective, to stay away from the tiniest hint of a bribe, and to decide the case based on the emes as ascribed by the Torah. Sometimes we might think that such a person wouldn't also have the midah of rachmanis, of mercy, of chesed, of loving kindness. But the great Dayanim of Am Yisrael through the ages combined both aspects. And that leads us to this week's story. The Dayan of Brisk during the time of Rav Chaim Soloveitchik was Rav Simcha Zelig Rieger. He was a famous Dayan in Posek. After his wife passed away, so a young man from the community stayed in his house and helped him with all that he needed, accompanying him to Beis Din, carrying his svarim. I read an article years ago that was written by a man who had the opportunity to substitute for that Heisbacher, as he was called, the bacher in the house. For a couple of weeks, when the person who had the job traveled away, he substituted, and he described the following incident. One morning, he was accompanying Simcha Zelig to the Beis Din, carrying his svarim, and an old man came over. He said, "Rebbe, I have a shaila." Reb Simcha Zelig calmly asked him to please tell him what happened. He said, "It happened in my kitchen. I had something milchik, something dairy. I had something fleshik, something meat, and I'm afraid that it got mixed up." So Reb Simcha Zelig asked him very calmly to please tell him what the substances were, the quantities, what was hot, what was cold. And he thought, and he eventually told him, everything is fine, everything is kosher. Try to be more careful next time. The man thanked him and went on his way. When the bacher came to Beis Din in the afternoon to walk Reb Simcha Zelig home, the same old gentleman approached and said, "Rebbe, I have a shaila." Reb Simcha Zelig said, "What is your shaila?" The man said, "Well, it happened in my kitchen. I had something milchik, I had something fleshik. I'm afraid that something got mixed in." Calmly, once again, Reb Simcha Zelig asked him, "Well, what were the substances? How much was there? Was this hot? Was that cold?" He thought, and he said, "Everything's kosher. Just be more careful next time." After the old man left, the bacher asked Reb Simcha Zelig, "But Rebbe, that's the same question he asked you this morning." Reb Simcha Zelig said, "I know. His memory is going. He asks me that question every day. Today he even forgot that he asked me once already, and he asked me the question a second time in the afternoon." So the man wrote in the article, I asked Reb Simcha Zelig, "Rebbe, you know the question, you know the answer. Why don't you just tell him it's kosher? Why do you ask all the questions? Why do you go through the process?" He says, "Because the man doesn't remember that he asked me the question. He's coming to me with a concern, with a weighty question of Torah practice. That question deserves respect. He deserves respect, and I give it to him every time." This is a picture of the Dayanim of Am Yisrael. Have a good Shabbos.